But yeah, I think we're hitting a lot of the stuff, and yeah, like you said, all we have to do is kind of do the details. Uh, I think some things that'd be interesting, just like the city. We put in a monument, right? That will be
Hmm.
uh something unique to it, but then also um we have to kind of give. We said that green moss on the kobolds. Well, I would say it would be also very important for essentially the mock sheriff to have something as well, whether it be a limp or some sort of characteristic. We haven't really gotten. We've created the NPCs, but we haven't given them like unique niches. Um, Essentially quirks, cute like cues to them. Uh, for instance, like the sheriff type character could have a very ornate designed elven crossbow. Um, that right there already makes him stand out a little bit more. And then the guards themselves, they could be wearing heavy leather armor, and you notice that there isn't a lot of metal inside of the city. Everything is made of wood or stone. That would be another thing that would be interesting.
Grimvic says, no groups in my neighborhood that play Vampire the Masquerade. It's already hard enough to find a D&D group. Oh, I'm sorry, Grim. Now, you might have to be the one to step up and run Vampire for a little bit to try and get people comfortable with it, and then you could pass off Storyteller to someone else. Oftentimes, if you really want to play a game, you have to be the one who runs the game first.
Well, and yeah, that's what I was gonna say. You can even run 5e and turn it into Vampire Masquerade without them even knowing. Systems are very good once you reskin them in a way. A kingdom can very much be a city. You will lose out on things, but I'm pretty sure you can transfer over the families and everything else.
Yeah, and if you're presenting the concepts and the culture, that could be the big hurdle up front.
Hmm.
Because then once people are comfortable in that playground, you can figure out the mechanics on the back end. All right, so I have the notes about the town and apparently the guard or some other aspects of it. What else? What else would you like to offer to the one shot here in order to flesh out things with more detail?
Um, I would say we're if we're going to do something for the kobolds, we should do something for the goblins. Um, because if they're going to be two factions against one another, it would kind of make sense going kind of gang oriented or uh, banner oriented, like back in the medieval times. Uh, I would say that would be very interesting, and also a quirk for the goblins because it sounds like the group is siding with the goblins. Um, Something as simple as they are entirely obsessed with apples. Um, Kind of a similar thing to the contrast between Golem and the hobbits, talking about stew and potatoes.
Okay.
Um, Things like that really give, once again, more texture to your world.
Because even if it's not explained, it still exists, and it
Mm-hmm.
subconsciously lets your players wonder this exists for a reason. I wonder what it is. There's an answer out there somewhere. Oh, the world is living and breathing and has a culture and, stuff that's happening around me, even if I don't get to interact with it actively.
Uh, yeah, and also I would say if we're going to even one step further, we can both say we have to kind of design the farmstead, and the best way to do that is say its type of economy. So it could be delivering wheels of cheese, or it could be um, giving some sort of crop, and then also it going into a town, a kind of other settlement. They're going to have something that they either consume or give out to give themselves a sense of wealth. Um, but this is very nitpicky type stuff. But um, and I would be uh, very hesitant to put too much detail into things, because then you can be going into the DM's my precious.
Yeah,
Um,
you get too attached.
yeah. And you also don't need to go down to the very nitty gritty detail of the child over in the corner is inside of this black market society and is the ringleader and blah 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 blah. Like, we only need the bits and pieces that are important, because sometimes if you don't leave yourself enough room to improvise, sometimes that can be one of the most damning things to a DM, because you've now set yourself up to be that railroad DM. Um,
I do wholeheartedly agree. Plus, you don't want to bog yourself down with managing details that may be irrelevant because you're there to present a story. That's your function at the table.
yeah.
And we want to make sure, especially in the context of a one shot, where I don't know, like we could even try and put an overarching goal of we're looking for 4 hours of content with this one shot. And if
Mm-hmm.
that's the case, that can help us try and trim some fat, or if we need to pad stuff, or otherwise, address it. If we intend to run a one shot, that could go into more, but a one shot all the same. What is our time for it? Is this a one
Oh yeah.
hour game? If that's the case, then a 1 hour one shot of the same content is going to be different than a 4 hour.
Oh, definitely. And I would also say another thing that I do, just as a DM thing, I'll put things in like, oh, I want to tell narrative in this place, or I want to in this combat to describe two things that are going on in detail to essentially to get that more rooted. But then also the monument, kind of like we were talking before, when we focus from the outside in and come into the story, the focal point of the monument would be very important, or even the outside in going into the dragon head, because that just fortifies the storyline. Or good old Animal Crossing. Was it Animal Crossing, or there was another one that was like it on the GameCube? I think it was Animal Crossing.
The first Animal Crossing was on GameCube,
Yeah.
and they had what was
But,
called, the reference that I was making to James was the Stalk Market, STALK, where they had turnips as an economical resource.
yes, it was Harvest Moon. I can't remember which one it was, but I had a friend that was very, very ill, and just got out of several surgeries and was bedridden for a few years. So one of the things that I would do is you could do this thing where you would take a memory card and you could put messages on it and stuff like that, and then you could put it in their GameCube and it would like leave mail for them. So I would like take it out and like leave him stuff at his Animal Crossing.
That's really cool of you.
Yeah, it was fun. It was an interesting time. We would play a lot of different games, and I learned how great Champions of Noroth Return to Arms was.
That's a D&D game, correct?
D&D ish. Uh, there is Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. That's the equivalent, which is also a very fantastic game. So look at us. We're professional Twitchers now, talking about video games and D&D.
Well, we got to keep up with the culture and make sure that Twitch is happy with us here. I don't think the D&D corner of Twitch has ever really been under tremendous fire, but I guess it doesn't hurt every now and again. If we have any of those video game players that exist on Twitch that ever decide to give us a chance, we gotta sound like we know what we're talking about.
Oh,
Go
I was
ahead.
just gonna say that's my favorite genre of video game: top-down hack and slash with a controller. And if you like those games, the latest one that has come out that is even similar to that is Victor Vran. Is a really good title if you like that style of game. But okay, so
Mm-hmm.
what kind of quirks should we put on? Like, what banner should we give the goblins, or a similar thing? We can give them each a ring or a piercing.
Well, oftentimes it's something that is simple. Even with humans, where it's a color or a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
It could simply be circles and X's, where kobolds like X's and goblins like circles,
Mm-hmm.
or squares and triangles, or something along those lines. Enough to differentiate, or if you want to leave a clue by shape or color or pattern, it can be easier to assign a clue to a party if there's consistency in its presentation.
So I'm thinking, like, what if they go by the term the Black Fang, and they each have a black tooth, and that could be something to that, and we can put that marking on the cart if they're trying to like tame it or something like that. And then
Okay.
we were talking about the green moss. Trying to think about kobolds. Kobolds are they more serious, aggressive, or are they more?
They're in the way that D&D presents them, they're aggressive because they're trying to live up to their presumed draconic ancestors. So they can be tribal. They want to be big and mighty because, well, they're not. And I think they understand that. But so it's sort of a, we want to celebrate, who we are claiming we are or were. Or I should say
Mm-hmm.
were, they claim that they are. So they can very much be aggressive and territorial, much like at least their concept of their dragon kin. I would say though that in that same vein, they would at least pretend to try and be clever or to talk, because dragons are known to do that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a sense, I would almost get broadly more of a lawful alignment for kobolds, more of a chaotic alignment for goblins.
Mm-hmm.
More of a goblins live free and they're their own people, whereas kobolds might live more as we are. We are products of our ancestors. There's a methodology to living. There's these rituals we go through to make sure that we're worshiping our ancestors, and so we can create these two societies by kind of assigning these topics or these different approaches to life that are not necessarily, they don't have to be opposite all the time, but
Hmm.
they're different. You can differentiate them easier.
Okay. So with that, like, would the green band work for them?
Sure.
I would say
Um,
that something simple like that, the black veins and the green band.
no, wait. You said you said, well, black teeth, or did I miss something else?
A black, well, yeah, that would actually make more sense for goblins just blackening all their teeth.
Okay.
Yeah.
And by bands, do you mean like sewn manufactured things you wear on like your shoulder or something? Or are you
Yeah.
saying that their scale color ours is like green or something?
Well, we were talking earlier that they wear war paint that's green from a foliage that's native to their land. I'm just saying if we're going to run with that,
Okay.
because that gives us something more for the goblins to essentially develop character. And like, so they could say something like that they hate the green bands and stuff like that, and you can refortify their society and have kind of jokes about them. Um, but
Mm.
essentially, the more things you have to work with inside of your NPCs or your factions, it gives you more to draw from when it comes to role playing the society. Like for instance, the if you were running into uh like lizard folk and stuff like that, and you were ripping on them, calling them scale tails and stuff like that, or you were talking about humans being round ears. That brings a little bit more reality to the the world that we're in.
All right, so we have some cultural notes to help differentiate the factions. I guess to that extent, there should be some sort of maybe banner or color or symbolism for the town. I mean, is the town an elven town? Is it human? Is it something? I don't know. It's a town of furbolgs, maybe. Um,
Yeah.
it could be whatever we want them to be, but we should fill in details for them there too.
Hmm.
Something that was brought up before, though, would be also a treasure, a treasure to
Yes,
obtain.
loot.
Um,
Yes.
I have the note in the mouth of the dragon because it may not necessarily be monetarily valuable, but it could have a good clue or something. And then, of course,
Hmm.
there's the concept that we threw out earlier with the treasure that could be hidden in the cart or hidden in the head or something else along those lines. But we could make a treasure parcel. What
Well,
kinds of
yeah.
things might be in that, especially in the context of a one shot, where you may not use this thing ever again after getting it. So I mean, we could
Hmm.
hand out a +3 Holy Avenger, but if there's
Hmm.
no more combat after that, unless that somehow emboldens the characters to take on all the town guard and murder people, because hey, that could happen. What
Yeah.
what would be some treasure considerations that would be fulfilling for a one shot and could lead into an ongoing adventure?
I would say as long as the items aren't combat oriented, generally you can get away with a lot of things like consumables, like very strange potions, uh, could be useful there. I mean, and if you're going like really off the deep end, uh, you could take something that players don't necessarily get to interact with all that much, uh, that can be unique to it, like let's just say they stumble upon the hand of Vecna just randomly somewhere. Um, Now that's an entirely other MacGuffin of its own.
Yeah, that definitely would be. That would compete with a dragon head for sure.
Oh yeah.
Unless you can somehow tie it in. But you would want to be careful about that so you're not distracting too much from the main story if you're going to drop names like Vecna
Oh yeah,
or you could
definitely.
argue would a level 3 party even know what the hand of Vecna is or looks like. You could just
Mm-hmm.
describe it as a mummified hand or
Yeah,
something along those lines.
but they kind of I mean, going back to the Tome of Annihilation, the Ring of Winter gets tossed around quite a bit. Um, and not saying that it's mandatory that it does, but it's mentioned and whatnot kind of loosely. And so things of that ability could go in, but that's if we're going big. Um,
I,
what would
I, I
be?
put down that trinkets could be good out of the equipment section in chapter 5. Trinkets could be good, especially if they belong to an NPC and are sentimentally valuable. That might be able to be redeemed then at the end of the adventure for something, for a favor or money or maybe something more customized now that the group has a need for healing or has a need for something or another.
Um, Also, I believe uh there is a I believe they're idols of some sort. I believe I talked about them. I'm saying believe too much, but the they're idols that you throw out and they become the creature that you
Oh, the tokens?
yeah.
Like a Qual's feather token, and there's like the ebony fly and the what like the jade hound or something like that.
Exactly. Giving out like one to each of the players, or maybe like have five lions that they could all work with. That would make it very unique just by itself as well. That might not overpower it because you can obviously adjust with something that's a constant like that. But the fact that your players at the end all end up with five lions very much gives a flavor of its own as well. So yeah, like things that uh, are accountable that you can essentially adjust for are usually safe to use, and then consumables like one-time use are usually fine as well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Um, I would say I'm trying to think. We could do something interesting, like we can do the Living Dead City. So, like, they walk as normal people and stuff like that and soldiers, but then at night they're revealed as skeletons. because skeletons can wear armor and hold weapons.
Is this something
Uh,
our party would? Is that a detail to, I guess, open with? Like you all come from a city that exists differently at night than it does in day, or is this something more?
uh, I was just throwing that out as a thing. I'm not saying it has to be, but I was just thinking of a monster stat block that would be a little bit different and give a bit of flavor. And then also, James, yeah, that would double the combat and the action economy and everything like that. But obviously, you would after a few levels, that's not going to matter as much. And then also on the stance alone, just getting through those beginning levels, like let's say you're really trying to get your party to level 5 or something like that. Sometimes giving those idols or something like that is really important, essentially for an XP bump. Okay, are we good
I
on?
can see that. I mean, there'd be a couple maps to whip up, or at least to go to Donjon or some other places in order to manufacture a map. Or everyone out there, if you have MS Paint, you don't need anything super fancy. You can generate an awesome map in MS Paint. We've done that plenty of times on this channel.
Let's see. What else do we have? I mean, we're coming up on kind of everything. I guess we need to describe the smells. If we were going, it's undead. We can say that the town is entirely uh, smells of embalming fluid and is very sterile. Something like that. Uh, a descriptor of you go in there, and even though it is the dead of winter, and use the keyword dead in there, even though it is the dead of winter, the smell of death still lingers. Something like that would be pretty impactful. But we're just adding in more elements.
James says, I made my first world map in Heroes of Might and Magic 3. I presume then that game has a. Like, do you use it to create your own campaign, but you made a map and you exported it for D&D purposes? Yeah, the Dead of Winter is a board game. It's a zombie survival. Well, and a nature survival too, because the cold will kill you. It's a very unique board game. Oh, cool, James. Oh, I always like learning about stuff like that.
Um, but let's see what do you feel this is essentially missing? I think we've hit a good majority of the.
Any of the major things it's missing would be the names of the NPCs and their stat blocks for reference. At
Mm-hmm.
this point, it's not so much detail but polish, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if we were to offer this to other people, then you'd want to make sure that the formatting was such where it says read or paraphrase the
Oh,
following, and then it would give some
yes.
block text. It would have some descriptors of NPCs, and in all honesty, a one shot about this size, I'd say you could probably fill about 10 pages. We would definitely want a map as well.
Oh, definitely.
But again, that's some extra time, some polish. The story can go on narratively without a map. The map is slightly window dressing, because it'll help immerse you psychologically into the story and into the region.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe a page kind of describing the general history of the area. It would be the like a one-page equivalent to a campaign primer. Do you make those for your players when you run a campaign, Technatron?
A campaign primer?
Yeah, where you describe, especially in like a homebrew setting, kind of the state of the world, what exists, what doesn't, kind
Oh,
of like
yeah.
half fluff, half crunch. These are my
Mm-hmm.
homebrew rules, but I'm going to describe it. Why don't elves exist in this area, kind of
Mm-hmm.
a thing.
Yeah, like and another thing that I like to do is during my next session, I'll ask one of the players that uh well, it doesn't matter what player, but at the beginning of the session, I'll have them do a summary of the game before because that puts them on their toes of thinking they might get called on the next week, so they pay more attention. Um,
Back when I
that's
still handed out experience points to level up, I did something similar where I'd have everyone recount the game, and the more they remembered, or if it was done in character as sort of like a role play warm up, I'd give them a little bit extra experience points for it.
nice. Have you moved on to the milestone?
Yes, and I haven't looked back.
Fair enough.
I get experience points. I understand why they exist and that they do have a unique function. I don't
Hmm.
think they're holdovers from days of yore. I personally do not prefer experience points. It's extra accounting. It could distract from the story because you're more
Hmm.
worried about everything you can break for every 10 exp you can get per barrel or whatever.
Hmm.
It can just, in my opinion, I feel experience takes more away from the experience, well, of storytelling, than by
Hmm.
contributing to it. And so once I made the switch in fourth edition to milestones.
Okay.
When I made that switch, never looked back. So it's that's why when we resonated so well when you're talking about going over the plot points for the one shot, and you know what? If we're presenting this as a one shot, I think we'd actually have to calculate. We would have to calculate uh, experience points for
Hmm.
overcoming things, and that's fine. But again, that's polish. That's a little bit of detail, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that this one shot could be enough. There's enough content here that you could probably go from 3 to 4 without really stretching the imagination too far.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And you can even if the chase happens, that right there um would reward experience as well if you're still doing checks and whatnot.
Yep,
And I don't think
chases,
anyone.
traps, hazards.
Mhm. But yeah, there's cases where it just really depends on what you're running. Like me personally, like there's a bunch of homebrew rules that I use, but my one main rule is I do not put homebrew into my game unless it makes the game better.
Mm-hmm.
So many times I've run into people's homebrew and it just bogs down the game.
Can you give an example of that?
A DM was running materia in his game
Oh.
and it just became entirely like it was XP on top of XP, and there was just an entirely different system that works well in a game. I love material in Final Fantasy VII,
Mm-hmm.
but when he tried to apply it to a game, it was just so clunky.
Yeah, it's a bit of an inventory management mini game when you want to go
Mm-hmm.
and kick indoors, fight monsters, or solve political riddles. Also, hey, DJ Chocolate, it has been a bit. Welcome back. It's good to see you. Got into a good and bad sleep schedule. Lost my old Discord account. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Well, hey, welcome back. I think you still have a. I think you might have $1 floating in mini credits still. But still, DJ, if you want to rejoin us back on Discord, you're welcome to do so. And you'll see that there's an accounting. At least it would have been under your old name, but there's still an accounting of the dollar that I think you still had. So welcome. It's awesome to see you back here. We're in the finishing stages. Besides putting some polish on the one shot, I think we had a really good brainstorming week. We went over the concept of reskinning monsters, or the roles of NPCs, just the skeleton of a one shot upon which we drape the muscles and the skin, and we weave the
Mm-hmm.
nerves through and make it a functional thing by itself.
Oh, very much so. And then also uh, just how each other would go about building certain things with the tools that were put out was very interesting as well, between the chat and just us and what we were doing, and that was really fun to see.
Yeah. James
Um,
says, forgot what you just called it. The setting description? I think it works best if you highlight the differences. An example, 99% the same, but water flows up in this world.
and oh, and I was also going to say, were there any things that came out to you, Maddie, during this session that was like kind of a light bulb or something new that gave you a creative outlet?
In going through and in listening to your thoughts and your methodology, um, I I traditionally haven't considered NPCs as fulfilling a role like kind of what you were doing when we were popping open minis. This is the info dump. This is the this is the role. This is the role, and then we fill the role by what's being produced. Now, I would say I am weaker as a DM when it comes to NPCs. Not that I can't make compelling ones, but especially after my first few games where I think I had too many NPCs,
Mm-hmm.
I really scaled back to try and put the focus back onto the players. And so this is something, if any of you are newer DMs out there, um, be careful how many NPCs you have active, especially with the party, but let alone, it suddenly becomes the game of NPCs. And the player characters are just, the roads or telephone lines between them, and they're not the movers and shakers. The story's more about the activities of the NPCs, and that's even if the NPCs are in a support position, because then it turns into what you're talking about before. It turns into collecting materia, and how do you develop it, and how
Mm-hmm.
do you wait and cultivate it, and you mix it for the right thing. Meanwhile, you're trying to present a story and keep things moving, but everyone's waiting for all these NPCs to make a move first.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also it's very important, especially with newer groups. NPCs are also there to give essentially the quest and move along the characters, but also it's there to uh, kind of touch on the reality check to them as well. Like, just the fact that NPC recognizes that a cleric is in the group and is very interested in their deity and how they are that person. That's one of the few ways a DM can really call on a player and highlight them. Um, which is a good tool. But I've always noticed that players, if you ever have that one player in the group that can essentially move the spotlight to other players, is so much more effective than what I can do as a DM. Um, just a weird little passing thing that I've noticed.
As you were talking, and I think you made good points there. I was making sure to reply back to our organic artist, who did make an interesting point about the system differences, and having like a specialized NPC like an info dump was probably more popular in third edition, where there was way more skills that a party just couldn't, fulfill in a meaningful capacity. Hey, Delcorin, welcome. Delcorin, since you spoke up and came out of lurk mode, I want you to tell me what inspiration you've walked away from this week's workshop presentation. Go.
Oh, talk about that spotlight movie.
Yep. Come on, Delcorin, what'd you learn? I'm putting you on the spot. If anything, you learn not to talk in this chat, or I'll call you out. That'll teach you. I agree, James. I wholeheartedly agree. There's, I think it's the completionist in a lot of us, as individuals, as nerds, as D&D players or whatever, where we want to feel as complete as possible, where we have as few limitations or as few weaknesses as possible. Delcorn, that's an extremely acceptable answer. I just got here, so I've been inspired to pop in and say hello. Delcorin, you answered the question, and I appreciate that. and DJ, who also just arrived, you've learned blankety blank blank. So yes, I enjoyed talking about the NPC roles, Technatron, and of course, a lot of the concepts, these are things that maybe in some way I've employed, but I never thought about it the same way. You know that the 3 Ys were very impactful to me when you were talking to me about them on your channel a while back ago when I was hanging out with you there. Because it just made sense. It's something that I did, but I guess I never really paid attention, and so it was difficult to quantify or maybe truly appreciate, or even just to form it into a tool that now I can carry on my belt. And so while I've said the 3 Ys before, and it's something that I've practiced and I've endorsed as well on this channel, that's another great takeaway that I've had by talking with you, and to pick another dungeon master's brain. How do you organize things? How do you think about these things? What are the concepts that you employ, or the concepts that you use? And so it's been very fun for me to be able to listen and to sit back a bit and absorb another approach to making the things that we have. Because while I've referenced, the books, I haven't brought up any of my normal, like, methodical worksheets or anything along those lines. It's been along this very free form, we might reference something, but this has just been, look, do you have a Word document and an imagination? Look, just build, step by step, layer by layer.
Yeah, and that's kind of the trick. Always keep digging. You'll eventually get somewhere.
Organic artist, I agree about the Eberron setting and shifting things to social skills as well. DJ, what's on the table for tomorrow? Not broadcasting. I take Sunday night and Monday night off traditionally to rest, and then I broadcast our ongoing D&D game on Tuesdays, so you all can see that I practice what I preach. And then Wednesday through Saturday is our workshop. Now, things are going to be a little bit different. This week, we're going to roleplay on Tuesday. Wednesday and Thursday, I'll have some kind of a fun. We'll do something fun. I don't know if it'll necessarily be D&D related. I might play a video game or something, because I'm only going to be broadcasting 2 nights. I'm sorry, 2 nights of workshop, so it's technically 3 nights. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Because I am beginning my summer vacation. No, wait, I'm not. Am I? Hang on. I changed it just recently, and I want to make sure I'm consistent. I'm looking at our broadcasting tab on our Discord. Yes, so I will not be broadcasting on Friday the 21st. So Wednesday and Thursday will be a workshop where I'll sit back and we'll play a video game together and have some fun. And then I will not be broadcasting again, with the exception of possibly Tuesday role-playing games, as long as I'm not out of town or my players aren't out of town. I will not be broadcasting workshop stuff until July. After the first week of July, as I take my summer break. And I'll be working on a bunch of stuff on the back end. I'm not actually taking a break. It just means I'm not broadcasting. Pardon, my voice is getting a little thin here. So yeah, DJ, we meet only to part again, as I'll be taking the next 2 nights off. Grim says what I got from all this is it's not necessary to have everything on paper. Just some big plot hooks and the big picture in mind, and you can bring a lot to the table. Exactly, Grimvex. Just trust in yourself. You have been born a storyteller. Have your notes, have your guidelines, and trust yourself to get from point A to point B. Snicer says, building, building, building. Keep that train wreck building. I mean, what? And TJ Fate shows up at the mention of train wrecks. Coincidence? Probably. DJ says in the 3 whys, if I recall, it's why are they where they are, why are they doing what they do, and why they can be. Honestly, the 3 whys are just that. Statement, why? Answer, why? Answer to the answer, why? And now you've built a history. You've explored a notion, and you're more comfortable adapting to it, to improvise around it, because you have an understanding, at least a baseline understanding, of the functionality of the piece that you're presenting.
And I'll also say a really good thing also, don't be afraid of being unprepared if you have the things or tools ready for when you essentially fall. So like the random generators and stuff like that, like things that are essentially like your parachutes if you need to come up with an end piece really fast, or you're drawing a blank. Have all the pieces there waiting for you if you're just going to run a game with little to no prep. Have things that can either inspire or catch you when you're needing to do descriptions. So for instance, like they come up to you, you need a random NPC, random generator, click once, throw it into the game.
Yep.
And sometimes all you need is just a name, and throw on dwarf, elf, whatever it is, and run with it.
Those are some other good techniques that not only did you share, but more importantly than sharing them, to let people know it's okay to do this. And one of that is use DM tools. Use a screen, use a character generator, or something along those lines. The other is take your time. Narrate the description slowly so you have time to think while also being impactful to your players.
Yeah, dramatic spacing.
Dramatic
Very
spacing? Or just honestly call for a break. Look to the player that baffled you and say, you know what? That's an awesome point you brought up. I need to actually think about that. And while I do so, I don't know, let's just take a break. I'm gonna get up and
Mhm.
kind of walk outside a little bit, stretch, get some fresh air, because you really and have it come across as positive, right? Don't
Mhm.
admonish your player for making you think or for inspiring you or to get you to question something. Say that was an awesome contribution. But I have to think about it. So hang on. Let's put a pizza order in or something. And by the time the pizza comes, tell you what, you all can sit back and eat, and I'll have your answer, and I'll present it to you because I need a little bit of time to work this in.
Mhm.
An awesome example of that, by the way, a friend of mine was running Vampire the Masquerade, and and so obviously I was playing in this game, and another friend of mine was, who was playing as a gunsmith, and someone who's very active about this, and so a bit of a paradox was brought up, or a mystery about some guns that we had found, and trying to, what do we do with these things? And despite there being 4 or 5 players at the table, the player who was playing the gunsmith simply asked the storyteller, "Can I check the serial numbers? I should have access to the database." And at that point, the storyteller just stopped and his eyes widened because the most simple, elegant solution to figuring out where these guns came from or details about them to help us solve what we're trying to solve
Mhm.
just came to light. It was something that
Mhm.
not even the storyteller had considered. Because he probably had something planned, like, we're gonna go talk to the nos, or we're gonna do a, we're gonna go street pounding, knock on doors, or we're gonna do a bunch of elaborate stuff and call in favors. And meanwhile, this absolutely simple, elegant solution just dropped in his lap. And there's no reason to say no. I mean, even if he said that some of the serial numbers were filed off, although I think as he
Mhm.
described the guns, he said that they were immaculate. Um, and he rolled with it. I mean, he needed time to process it. And by the way, I will tell you all out there, I am absolutely, I was happy at that and at many other interactions, because the player in question who offered that elegant, simple solution is someone that maybe if you didn't know him, you might not consider him capable of doing so, because he has a learning disability and he doesn't always communicate the best. I'll tell you what, though, he's been role playing with me now for about 6 years, and the strides that man has had in becoming more adaptive and fluid in speech and adding numbers and a lot of this other stuff that we might take for granted, that is absolutely manifested in him, and has helped him to overcome some of his speech presentation and just the things he thinks about, and how quickly. And so we had someone, and he's not shy about it. I'm not, I'm not trying to talk like, like I'm superior to him and I'm talking down to him, or like, oh, poor sweetie, bless his heart, kind of a thing, in that sarcastic, kind of sweet Southern way. Um, no, he's open about it. He understands it. He accepts it. And I'll tell you, this man has dropped some of the most insightful questions or observations about a scenario that has been brought up in many role playing games. And if you met him otherwise, you might think he's a little timid, or I don't know. Some people might just kind of have a feeling about those who have a speech impediment or a learning disability, and I understand that. I mean, I'm not. We all have these instincts, or we may not just want to go up and talk because who knows? There could be something more that we don't know, and we don't want to upset someone because we say or present ourselves in a certain way. So I don't want to
Mhm.
make anyone feel awkward about that. But when you sit down and you have that pure moment of revelation or contribution asked through a simple question or presented, you know, that can rock your world as the DM or the storyteller or the GM, or something that comes to mind, it's bugging you. You're looking around the table at all your other players. You're like, why hasn't anyone asked this question yet? Surely I can't be the only one that has this question about the setting. About why do the kobolds in the Dragon Wagon adventure all have moss on
Mhm.
them or something like that, but no one's asking. Well, maybe I shouldn't, because what would people think of me? They'll think you want information and you're brilliant because that could be a huge clue. So don't hold that stuff back. Anyway, I'm sorry. I got on a soapbox again. Jeez.
Uh, no,
Shame on me. Shame.
no, but you're hitting all good points, and yeah, it's always very surprising, and also the understanding that like people in their lives and stuff, even though you don't think they contribute in the most common way, they actually have a very unique and outside of the box way of viewing things as well, because learning comes in all different shapes and sizes, so it offers a very interesting perspective to solve a problem. So, yeah, that's really cool.
Organic says playing second ed totally helped me to do fast math in my head. I absolutely believe it. Snicer says, Maddie, would you allow a player using 2 combat turns, one to cast a spell and the next one to cast a cantrip, to cast a spell like Grease, then follow up with another spell like Firebolt to potentially combo the spells together to create an area of fire? Snicer, yes. If the intention is put out there that you want to, that you put some thought into it, it's appropriate for the circumstances, I am personally fine with adapting the situation at hand to allow for something along those lines. In fact, on the Thursday, the public game that I run at the store, I had someone who was asking about setting Grease on fire in a similar fashion, and we came up with on the fly, because it kind of put me on the spot, and I said, well, I'll tell you what, right now, given the circumstances in this moment, so that's the caveat, it may not be able to be reproduced, but right here and right now, the situations are such that XYZ, right? This happens. So yeah, I love rewarding creative thinking. Can you always do it from that point on? Maybe. It might depend. Is this going to be something this person wants to specialize in, and you want it to be more permanent? Then do it more often in combat or elsewise. Practice casting, Grease in the cantrip or something, and then we can make this a custom rule for you because you've practiced it like a language or a skill or something. Someone get Maddie a taller soapbox. I'm already 6'1", DJ. I don't know how much taller I gotta be, but I appreciate the sentiment. Organic was replying to Snicer. Some of the spell descriptions have been kind of nerfed to be very, very precise. And I would agree with that, Organic, and so that's why, it would be up to the DM in the circumstances. You might have DMs that say, no, just play it by the rules, because maybe they don't want to do the extra math, or they're just a by the book person. Others might say, yeah, that makes sense. It's Grease. Grease is flammable. And Roger, that is another balancing factor too. It'll make the players happy until the kobolds hit them with the same thing. Because if it can manifest once in the world, who's to say it can't manifest again? One of the old things that I did with my private group is we'd always start out with the core books. In the older editions anyway, I should say. And I said, if you want to introduce something else, like a class, or you want to try and like weave in stuff with prestige classes or something, if you open a book for yourself, that opens up a book for me. And suddenly the monsters in that book are relevant, and the mechanics in that book are relevant. And just so you know, I get to roll more dice as the DM than you. And so that's the balancing factor. I'll run things vanilla, and we're gonna have a ton of fun doing it. But if you want to crack into all splat sources, that's a Pandora's box. I heard a situation with that control water to make the air under a sea beast that goes down 100 feet to cause fall damage when the water above the beast to become falling down on it. Oh, yeah, that could be a creative use, DJ. Yeah, anything the players can do, the NPCs can do, and sometimes better, because that could just be their thing. They've lived their whole life for this moment, and this is their one shot. Excellent question, and I'm glad to see a bevy of answers above.
One of my favorite ones is if you're a small character, you use the enlarge reduce spell or effect, making yourself smaller to teeny, and then use your mage hand to pick you up and fly anywhere.
Yes.
That,
Yep.
that's just so great.
It's very clever.
But I think we're hitting that hour.
It is 3 a.m. Just a smidgen past it. Anyone out there, do you have any more questions for myself or Technatron, or about the one shot that we have presented to you, and we kind of wrapped it up and put a nice pretty bow on it for you all? If so, then this is your opportunity to squeeze them in while you still can. Nictorek, Enlarge Reduce is not a 1 minute cast. It's a one action cast, and I believe it lasts for 10 minutes? No, it's concentration up to something. Give me one moment, I'll pull that up
It's
for you here.
concentration up to 1 minute.
Okay, concentration to a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking of drenching people with water, then smacking them with Pandora's box electricity that conducts water. And the fun thing is, half of my party has lightning theme to their characters. Yeah, thinking outside the box like that. Can you electrify a pond? Maybe. Maybe it deals less damage, but to more creatures as it kind of spreads out. Part of that depends on the water, too. Water can actually, water doesn't always act as the best electrical transmitter. It's actually more about the impurities that are in the water. Pure water, if I recall correctly, is actually a very bad conductor of electricity. But when you start introducing things like salt, like a metal, into it, then the electricity travels more easily. Can I give a short recap of the one shot before the videos of it comes out on your channel? Yeah. Yeah, pure water is a great insulator. Thank you, TJ. Technatron, would you mind giving a quick recap for DJ about the one shot?
The Dragon Wagon?
Yeah, the Dragon Wagon, that's right. The Dragon Wagon.
Uh, Essentially, what we're doing is we're taking elements from Mines of Fandelver, at least the beginning of it, and starting out with a farmer just asking a simple task to move their wares into a town. Along the way, they find a toppled over wagon that is uh, a pretty nice one, and it has the head of a dragon in it. On top of figuring out what it is, a battle essentially ensues through these kobolds that start chasing them down the hill while they're moving this new cargo, or at least the cargo that they have. And then they end up going into the town where they are accused of tempering either with evidence or having the head of a dragon, where they will be arrested and detained for at least a time until the goblins then break them out. And I believe that is where we've gotten to. And of course there's NPCs, weird monsters, interactions, the chase. But I think that's pretty much the kit and caboodle caboodle, I believe is what it's called.
Yeah.
And we have the monument and just other factors, and we're coming up with factions, the green bands and the
Black Teeth.
the black teeth goblins. Uh, but I was actually going to add in one that I think is interesting that most people overlook is having a hole and mold earth is if you can get anyone into a hole and mold earth over them, suffocation is one of the few things that just instantly says you're dead.
Yeah.
So it is a very effective tool burying things.
James, what is your specific question? James, I am not familiar enough with the older modules to be able to really give you a recommendation. I'm sorry.
Um, the thing is I can kind of take this over. A lot of the yawning portal stuff works. It's in the same area,
Oh, the
and
Tales from the Yawning Portal
mhm.
adventures. Okay.
And also, I mean, of course, Dragon Heist is the thing that leads up to it. If you're
Yeah.
just looking for modules, um, but there are several things. Just look for things around Waterdeep and modules that involve Waterdeep, and you should have a lot there. And also, if you start going with Undermountain, that's going to give you a ton of stuff as well.
All right. Anyone else? This is your chance to pick the brain of two DMs, at least the ones that are on the broadcasting end. Although, as we're seeing between Organic and Snicer and the others, you all have a lot of very good ideas for each other as well, and a lot of experience to share, which is honestly part of the magic of the community that we have all built together here.
I'm
If
gonna
not, there is someone that I'd like to raid who is. He actually raided us, I think, earlier in the week. 24 years DMing. Yeah, you have a little bit of experience, Organic. You know, you have a couple tips or tricks to share. That's honestly that's amazing and venerable, and I super appreciate that kind of experience, Organic. And yes, Technatron, please let folks know how to contact you.
yeah, I was just gonna throw that out real fast before the host happened, or the raid, if you will.